all things election on today's episode, but contrary to what a lot of media outlets companies are doing these days, we're just going to give you the plain facts. We are going to skip out on the confusion, the deception that many mainstream media companies and outlets like to promulgate, so here we are, all things election. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Josiah Evertson, and this is The Glorious Rescue.
Aren't you tired of feeling forced to choose between staying informed and being indoctrinated? Listen to the condensed news cycle without the lies, agendas, and confusion from the mainstream media, all while engaging in deeper discussions about the principles that have influenced our great nation. This is what rescuing America looks like. This is The Glorious Rescue.
What's going on? That is going to be what we are talking about on today's episode of The Glorious Rescue. Really break down everything that is the election, the 2020 election, presidential, House, Senate, all of that, what's going on right now, and kind of that inside scoop, I guess you could say, of what my predictions were in the last episode and how they have come to fruition today now that we have seen this after the election. Unfortunately, didn't actually want my predictions to be true. So first off, we're just going to start off and kind of unravel some of the different items that has happened over this last presidential election and talk about going forward what is next. So let's just start off by saying this is what no one predicted. This is not what I predicted. This is not what pollsters were predicting. This is not what the left expected. This is what no one expected. I expected it to be a landslide either way. My opinion, because I like to go off of sources and factual information, was that either the pollsters are wrong, the polls are wrong, or they're right. And if they're right, then we're going to have a huge Biden landslide. And if they're wrong, like they were back in 2016, then we're going to see Trump come out with a very large victory. Those were my expectations. That is what I assumed on either side it could be. Either the polls were right and Biden would come out with a very large victory, or they're completely wrong like in 2016 and Trump would come out very victorious. That is not what it was. That is not what happened. It is a tight race, so tight that it is still being counted, and we still don't know the answer, at least as of the recording of this episode. Who knows? I could record this, release it, and by the time I release it, we know. So we will continue to keep you updated, I guess, as we always do, but that is where we are sitting at as of right now. It's not what the left expected, not what the media expected, and most definitely not what the pollsters were expecting, because they were expecting a very large Biden win. National sweeping polls were running at 5% Biden, like on the most conservative. Some of them, most of them, 7% around that, and 10% were some of the very far-leaning ones, where Biden was up 10%. Now we know in the popular vote, Biden is up not even 2%. Electoral college is very close. We very well could come out of this with a Biden 270, Trump 268 type electoral. That is very possible at this point. Nevertheless, it is definitely not what the left was expecting, because they were expecting a sweeping referendum on Donald Trump. They thought that there was going to be a national and sweeping rebuke of Trump, his character, his policies, and yet that is not what happened. I don't specifically remember who it was, but I remember during election night watching this one reporter saying something along the lines of, there is the political election, the political issue, and the moral issue. Because, members of the activist media are the moral superiors of us. They're the elitists in true morality. Nevertheless, he said something along the lines of, yes, we may win the political election, speaking of Joe Biden, of course, but the moral election is one that we lost. The moral issue is one that we lost, because we did not see that sweeping rejection of Trump, this fascism, this evil character, right? That's the issue. So they were expecting a large, sweeping comeback in the House, in the Senate, hold their majority in the House, make a large progress in the Senate, and then obviously take the White House. But we know this. The House, the GOP, gained 6 seats so far. We're still waiting on some. And in the Senate, they only lost 1 in their majority. So they're more than likely going to hold, they are going to hold their majority in the Senate. They're making good ground as far as the Democrats' majority in the House. So it wasn't. And then the presidential election is highly contested. The numbers don't necessarily look like a rebuke on President Donald Trump. We know that. They're definitely not a rebuke, because there are still sweeping support of the president. But it is not that referendum, that rebuke that they were expecting. So another important thing to note that I think is very good, and that is that President Trump has been faring very well with minority voters. Florida, huge example of this. Cubans, Hispanics, you have all these different minority groups in Florida. It's a very vast and melting pot type area, and he fared very well with them. African Americans all across the nation. I think he pulled in at 18 or 20%, something along those lines, which is exceptional. If you go back to really all of the last main GOP presidents or presidential candidates, Mitt Romney, going back to Bush, even Reagan, you're looking at 8, sometimes 11, best 13%. And yet Trump was polling almost 20%. So he's doing very, very well. That's with African Americans, doing even better with the Hispanic community. So he's faring very well. Republicans in general are faring much, much better with minority groups. That's a cultural issue. Again, it's because of the culture war that the left is raging on a lot of items that we think are pretty mainstream and pretty normal as Americans. And the left has gone much more radical and much more corrupt in many areas to where it pushes these normal people and these people who kind of hold to traditional ideas, even though they may be left-leaning, they may be right-leaning, they still hold to a lot of traditional values or just mainstream American ideas. And so you see a lot of minority groups coming further and further and pushing more and more in larger numbers into the Trump community. They were so off, so unbelievably off. I already mentioned that. Here's one of them. Here is a Wall Street Journal article, a headline, right before election night. It says, swing state poll finds no late shift in presidential race. What they're referring to is the 2016 election where Trump started really closing in on that gap like 1, 2 days, 3 days before the election in the polls, and they missed it. And this headline and the article that follows is the Wall Street Journal reporters saying that pollsters are not finding any shift towards President Trump, that we are expecting that same 3, 5, 7, 13, 10-point lead on Joe Biden over Donald Trump. We're seeing that. We're not seeing anything in Trump's favor up until election. Obviously, we know they were dramatically wrong in that. Next is the activist media. I say activist because they are doing just that, being activists. Fox News decision to call Arizona early. The Associated Press not calling Florida and calling them hours late. I mean, hours late when we knew this was going to be for Trump. And also, can we just take a step back here and say, why is it that it seems like every single election, the Democrats think that they have a very strong advantage in Texas, and they think they're going to fare very well, and then every single time they get beat? Like, it's every single time, at least it feels like, where coming up, they think they're going to be doing well. Biden did a lot of campaigning in Texas leading up to the election, most of it being right up until election night, and then he gets whooped. I mean, absolutely wiped. Trump mopped the floor with him, wiped the floor with him. And yet the Democrats seem to do it every single election. I don't know what that is. Nevertheless, the activist media, they called Arizona early for Biden, even though that is still one of the highly contested ones. If Trump wins Arizona right now, he will win the election. And it's more than likely going to flip, but it's not really flipping. It's just counting the votes because they labeled it Biden way too early, days early, now we know. Nevertheless, they would not want to label Florida until hours on end. And we knew the outcome, and yet they decided not to. So there's that. We're going to take a quick moment to just look at this electoral map. And so we're going to talk about what is being contested right now. Biden at 264, Donald Trump at 214, according to my data. And it says here, I'll just say this here, more than likely, Trump has Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, these three on the side. He also has Alaska. We know this. That will put Trump at 268. Yes, that will put Trump at 268. The only other state is Nevada. That's Nevada. So if Arizona stays where it's at, Joe Biden, and Joe Biden wins Nevada, that's 6 electoral votes. That puts him at 270. So that puts this election at 270, Biden and Donald Trump at 268, which is very, very likely. Trump could win Alaska, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. And then Joe Biden keeps what he has and wins Nevada. That puts him at 270. That makes him the victor and the next president of the United States. However, I do see that as unlikely. Here's why. Donald Trump will more than likely win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, and Alaska right now, putting him at 268. And it's 268 to 264. Nevada, it is possible Joe Biden could win, but right now there's only a difference of 12,000 votes, and there's only 76% reporting. This very well could go Trump or Biden. If Trump wins it, he wins. Next is Arizona. It's called for Biden right now, but the gap has been decreasing. I want to say last night it was at 80,000. Now it's down to 60-some thousand, the gap between the two. Only 88% reporting. And these precincts, the votes that are coming in from these precincts, run heavily, heavily red. So Trump is making ground. So it's just a matter of, can he make enough ground up until all the votes are counted? That is highly likely. On top of that, you have Michigan and you have Wisconsin, which seem to indicate and see a lot of voter fraud right now that are being contested. I believe litigation is now in process in Michigan. There was like 100 and something thousand ballots dropped off through the night or tallied through the night for Joe Biden, none of them for Donald Trump. Very curious, very eye-opening. And so there's contesting in Wisconsin and Michigan. Wisconsin is only a difference of 20,000. So if there are counts of voter fraud, a recount wouldn't make up all the difference, but if there were recounting, voter fraud, all of that, Biden could lose Wisconsin. He could lose Michigan as well. These are possibilities. And then on top of that, a high possibility of him not actually keeping Arizona or winning Nevada. So back it up a little bit. More than likely, what I will say will happen is Trump will win Alaska, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. That puts him at 268, Biden at 264. Then, so assuming that, Joe Biden has to win Nevada, keep Arizona, and then hold Wisconsin and Michigan through all of this voter fraud and electoral issue. I don't see that as being very likely. Now, you could probably say something along the lines of, Josiah, how do you know? And I don't know, of course. These are just my predictions. I guess you could say I've been hesitant to give you my predictions because, again, I kind of in quiet room thought either was going to be a Biden landslide or Trump landslide. And yet here we are in the middle of a highly contested election where it could go either way. So I was wrong there, but what have I been right on? And I just got to say I'm kind of on it. This is why you should be subscribing, you should be following, you should be watching The Glorious Rescue, because if you remember in previous episodes, coming up, following to, and coming closer to the election, I said a few things. I said, first of all, I don't believe the pollsters. I don't necessarily know if we can trust them. They've been off in recent years. That's pretty mainstream. A lot of conservatives are saying that now, but that hasn't been mainstream for a long time. That's pretty recent up until about the 2016 election that people started to really look back, come back and say, wow, we don't trust the media. We don't trust the polling data. We don't really trust it because it's completely invalid, really, in a lot of cases. And so that's pretty normal, but I said that. I also said watch out for Pennsylvania. And I do think it's going to Trump, but Pennsylvania has been one to really, really watch out for. They're the ones that have been taking their sweet time and counting the ballots. So I said watch out for Pennsylvania. I said it could be delayed. This is pretty common. This is pretty well known, but I was right there, obviously. In the fact that it was very delayed, and it has been very delayed. And then I said a couple different things. I said it's going to be an absolute mess. We're in that mess right now trying to figure it out. I said everyone's going to be in denial, and everyone has been in denial. Conservatives, they've been raising questions about the voter fraud in Michigan and Wisconsin, I think it was, talking about how we're still going to come back and win Arizona, and Biden won't even win Nevada anyways. You have them in denial. You have the left in denial. Oh, going back to the right, you have them saying we're going to take this all the way up to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump even saying that at one point, saying that now, granted, if there is going to be voter fraud and if there are counts of that, yes, it will go to the court. There will be litigation and it will go up to the U.S. Supreme Court because they are the ones who do handle and discuss and delve into election issues. So you have them in denial. You have the left in denial saying this was supposed to be a big mockery of Trump and this was supposed to be wide sweeping and we were supposed to keep our advantage in the House and we're supposed to make huge progress in the Senate. We didn't do any of this. So everyone's in denial. It's a mess and this is where we're at. So again, that's where we're sitting at as far as the actual states. That's where I think we are sitting at. North Carolina also, this is just a side note. North Carolina did elect Madison Cawthorn. This is the young man, I want to say, not the quadriplegic, the paraplegic. Anyways, he does have a little bit of a handicap. He's the young patriot in North Carolina. He is now the youngest elected member of Congress. At age 25, he is now the youngest member of Congress, and he was elected in North Carolina. He has been very popular and all over social media, and very happy for him. Very good, conservative, very strong patriot. I'm excited to see that. It's good to see someone with that type of disability, although I don't want to call him having a disability because he is very able, and he's a very able-bodied man to carry out his duties as a congressman. So now going back to a couple of the states, for instance, Arizona. There is a lot of Phoenix-based data right now. This is one article I'm reading from a Phoenix-based data firm, and they're predicting that Arizona will flip for President Trump after all the ballots are counted. Many, many people are saying this. Arizona's 11 electoral votes. Trump wins that, and he wins those other swing states I was talking about. He will win. And NBC News gave a rough breakdown for the number of outstanding ballots yet to be counted in the Arizona counties. Again, there are Graham County, Greenlee County. I won't go through all these counties, but counties that run very deep red. I talked about that. I don't want to go back into it, but highly likely Trump will flip Arizona. Highly likely Trump can win Nevada. And highly likely that Biden will not be able to hold either Michigan or Wisconsin through whatever this voter fraud and whatever these ballots are. In one of the states, there were more ballots cast and more votes cast than there were registered voters for that state. Okay, well, that's a huge red flag because that's not even, that doesn't even compute. I want to say one of them was running at like 90-something% turnout rates. When in past, they've been at like 60 to 70%, and yet all of a sudden they're at 95% turnout rates. So some things aren't adding up. So that is the breakdown. That's what to look for, I would say, for this election. Obviously, if you are the one saying that you want Trump to win, that's the breakdown there. I hope that's giving you a rough estimate of what we're looking at. I hope that's giving you a brief summary of what's gone on, of what to look for, of the issues with the media, the Democrats, all of this. A lot of good key takeaways. A lot of takeaways with the minority groups, the House, the Senate. Strong ground kept in the Senate. Strong majority made up and gap made up in the House. And then still highly contested presidential election. I want to say it's a good thing now as a conservative and as a constitutionalist, as an originalist. It is a good thing that Trump put that Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, because who knows what could have happened if he did not. So we have many, many things coming up as always. I know I wanted to take a large chunk of the time here, the entire episode, to really unravel the election. A lot of what we're seeing, a lot of what's going on, and what to look for in the future. That's what I wanted the focus of this episode to be on. Again, in future episodes coming in on every Tuesday and Friday, don't forget, we will continue to have our end of show segments. I know in recent times we've kind of slipped a little bit on that to make sure to give us ample time, but this is pertinent. This is important, and hopefully this was a help to you. Also, I want to thank you for the help you have been to me. I've been able to see strong growth in the show, and I'm extraordinarily excited about it. So on audio platforms, we have seen, I want to say, double growth just from the last week or so. We've probably doubled in growth. So audio platforms are doing exceptionally well. On top of that, that's not even including the YouTube channel, which has done much better than I thought. It's fared very, very well. Obviously, the first episode was like the novel episode, and now people are starting to get into the routine. So if you want to listen, make sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts and iTunes, or on Spotify, or all your mainstream popular podcast playing platforms. That's what we are available on. Make sure to hit that subscribe, follow button on whatever platform you are listening to. And then if you want to listen to the video platform, please do so. Watch us over on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment, whatever you want to do, remarks, suggestions, tips, always open to that. You can do so over also on Instagram at The Glorious Rescue. Make sure to follow us there. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Josiah Everton, and this is The Glorious Rescue.